Coming up on show 913, a special edition, the new Hummer EV versus the Cybertruck versus Rivian. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Wednesday, 21st of October. Special edition as we look at the brand newly unveiled Hummer EV from GM under the GMC brand. 10 years after that brand, the Hummer was put to rest. It's back now in electric form. First, we'll look at the specs, then we'll compare it to the competition and work out which one would be the winner for you. Well, here's our first look at the newly unveiled Hummer EV, finally here, and now we know the stats. It has over 1,000 horsepower, very impressive, and they say 11,500 pound-feet of torque, which is impossible, but I'll tell you why later in the podcast. And a 0 to 60 time of less than 3 seconds. These are numbers that would make any other pickup truck, frankly, cry all the way home. The first thing to say about the Hummer EV is that it is a proper pickup truck with a decent-sized 5-foot bed, not an SUV that some people thought may be unveiled, a bit like Rivian have their SUV and their truck coming out around the same time, but no, this is a proper truck. It's fair to say, I wouldn't gamble my house on it, but I think pretty fair to say, there will be an SUV based on this platform sometime soon. So let's work out if we can finally say an environmentally friendly Hummer. Yeah, because back in the day, it was single figures for the miles per gallon. In some ways, GMC making the Hummer electric makes no sense whatsoever to do an electric version of this car. It's about as aerodynamic as my fist. One of the unique characteristics of the Hummer is the vertical sides, which go all the way up to the roofline. They don't taper in. In fact, the whole thing is just a big square box that needs to somehow punch its way through the air. Back in the day, that was very slowly. I mean, very slowly. 0 to 40 miles an hour would take some time before next Wednesday. The performance of the combustion Hummer was, and I think I'm being fair when I say this, terrible. And of course, that miles per gallon figure just didn't make any sense as gas got more expensive and we started to do things like, want a planet to live on for the next few years. On the other hand, making an EV out of this vehicle does make sense because there's plenty of room to put a big battery. In fact, there's plenty of room to put whatever you want. First off, it looks like a Hummer. That may be a stupid thing to say, but there's been lots of discussion over the design of this, and they've been very faithful to the original design, even of the Humvee. That was the military vehicle designed to do anything, to go anywhere, to get American troops out of a spot of bother. In fact, they used to dump Humvees out the back of military helicopters flying low over the ground. They were built tough. Well, the version they unveiled last night was running on 35-inch tyres, but it can accommodate 37s, like the original did, I think, I'm right in saying. And if you do swap your tyres by 2 inches, it magically knows and adjusts the speedo accordingly. There are 18 cameras pointing in every possible direction in this high-tech version of the Hummer for the autonomous driving assistance systems, but also to help you when you're off-roading. That includes 2 cameras that face down under the vehicle, looking at the axles, because if you are going off-roading and you haven't got a spotter, it's very easy to wipe out on a big rock or a boulder. So useful to know what's underneath your vehicle. You're not crashing into something. But won't these cameras get dirty? I mean, the original Hummer could go through 2 feet of water all day long because of the air system they designed for that diesel engine. And so it can wade, and this can wade as well. Even going through just usual dirt and off-road muck. Well, they say we've thought of that and we've added some sprayers to the under cameras. So when they get dirty, a little squirt will clean them off. Truck fans will be pleased to hear there is a back window that drops down to get some fresh air flying in the cabin, and if you want to go al fresco, the whole roof comes off in 4 separate sections. But what do you do with it when you've taken the roof off? Well, you stow it in the huge frunk. I mean, this thing is enormous. It's bigger than some bedsits. You could literally live in the frunk. They call it the Infinity Roof because they let the marketing department get their hands on it, and there's another name coming soon which I'm not happy about. But everything on this Hummer is bigger and better than before. Why settle for 2 windscreen wipers when you can add 3? There's the 5-foot bed in the back, the tailgate, which is a sort of 6-way tailgate system that GM have. It can fit speakers in if you're having, I don't know, the party in the middle of a cornfield like you're in some sort of country music song. And of course it'll power all of your tools as well. Underneath, there's body armour to protect it against rocks, so when you're taking the kids to school in the morning, you won't get your battery punctured. Fully adjustable air suspension raises and lowers the Hummer by 8 inches. That's a total of 16 inches of ground clearance at its highest setting. Not quite as good as the original Hummers back in the day that were custom built for off-roading, but look, how much do you really need? Air suspension will travel up and down. Most of the time it will run at about 10.1 inches of ground clearance, but you can change the mode. They call it extract mode. In other words, you've got yourself stuck. And if you want to get unstuck, then you need extract mode. That'll raise it up to 15.9 inches to be specific. And when you're cruising on the highway, it'll lower by 2 inches down to about 8 inches of ground clearance for efficient driving. And I'm guessing, when I say efficient, I mean not at all efficient, because this is a slab of car pushing its way through the atmosphere. I guess lowering it helps a little bit with that big old battery. Oh, which we'll get onto in a separate section at the end of the show. This is why I've not mentioned the battery yet. Whilst we're down at the bottom of the car talking about the wheels, the tyres and the suspension, we'll talk about steering. And you'll have heard about crab mode if you've been following the launch of this. Not just the front wheels that steer on this car. And okay, rear wheel steering is nothing new, but having the rear wheels moving in the same direction as the front, that's pretty rare. Has been done before, but they've called it crab mode. The rear wheels will move 10 degrees in either direction, so you can move them in the same direction as the front wheels and crab diagonally. The car has so much off-road prowess, a lot of ground clearance. In fact, there's so much ground clearance on this car, they had to make an extendable half shaft, a bit like, I don't know, like an extendable tripod leg on this camera stand I'm looking at. Best way I can describe it. This thing actually moves in and out because the car goes up and down so much. It's very high-tech. It's full of clever software control that will adjust that ride height and suspension 500 times a second. Underneath the skin, we find 3 electric motors. Why not 2? Why not 4? Well, let's explain. Firstly, there is one motor driving the front 2 wheels, and that's because under maximum acceleration there's so much heft to this car. The weight balance of this thing shifts so far rearwards that even though it's got adaptive dampers and suspension to keep it as level as possible, the front axle is traction and grip limited. So that's until you're up and underway and you're sort of going sort of 20-30 miles an hour. I think it can still brake traction at the front. So why put 2 motors up the front? It's a waste of power. However, on the rear axle, where you can get the power down to the tarmac or the off-road trail, 2 motors, and they drive a rear wheel each. So they're not connected. It means you can do some funky software stuff with torque vectoring. That is just basically car speak for saying that you can change the speed of the rear wheels as much as you want to for maximum traction. And all of that electric power, as you know, as an EV fan, can be applied instantly because it's an EV, which means it'll be one of the most capable off-roaders around, if not the most capable. Instant torque delivered exactly when you need it, not waiting for, I don't know, diesel engines to spool up the turbo or anything. Inside the Hummer, yeah, it's more modern. If you're familiar with how they tuned they turned the Humvee into a road-going Hummer, which was basically to add some indicators and a horn to make it road legal. It is an improvement. I mean, it's better, but not by much. It still has that massive centre console. Goodness knows what's underneath it. Inside the original Hummer, the driver was just stuck out to the, left-hand drive, so the left of the car. Then there was about 12 feet of space where there was this kind of weird centre console thing that you could, I don't know, eat your dinner off of. And then there was the passenger, which again had no real leg room, the passenger, because it was designed as a military vehicle. So It was uncomfortable. You think it would be huge, but it's not. Actually narrower. The original Hummer was narrower than a lot of modern cars, shorter than a lot of modern cars as well, because of the design, the box. It always looked so big on the road. So the best way I can describe this is industrial. I'll say that. Don't get me wrong, looks okay, two-tone colour seats, non-animal fabric, so they've designed this. It's a handmade fabric, and they've replicated that little diamond pattern on the seats, the doors, the dash, and this new material, as well as being completely animal-free across the whole vehicle, does mean that it looks like you can hose the thing down like a proper truck. 2 seats up front, 3 in the back, air conditioning in the back, so you've got your USB sockets, your phone chargers, a little screen in the back as well to set your own HVAC settings, and plenty of storage, even behind the seat backs. So not the boot, the trunk, but the seat backs open up like little doors, and there's, I don't know, enough room in there for a sandwich or something. Let's talk performance. 0 to 60, less than 3 seconds. How do they do that in a Hummer? Well, they've given it a bit of a silly name. The marketing department have been let loose with this one. They've called it Watts to Freedom. Right. Watts to Freedom is, well, I think it's the first and last time I'm going to say that, by the way. We're going to call it launch mode because it's launch mode. Basically, what this does is, how do you propel a car the size of a small family house down the road in 3 seconds? You lower the suspension, you play some trickery on the dampers, and 3 seconds later, you're almost breaking the legal speed limit in some places. An F250, by the way, well, it's about 7 or 8 seconds, I think. So this is going to make proper truck fans look over their shoulder and go, I want one of them really badly. I know it's electric and I can't coal roll all of these Priuses driving around, but I don't really want to save the planet, but it's just better in every way. Proper performance for proper truck people. Right, the driver information display is 12.3 inches. The middle screen is 13.4 inches on the infotainment. That'll show you things like the GPS coordinates of where you are in the world, the angle, the pitch, the roll of the vehicle. A cool little animation of the vehicle that moves around as you are travelling off-road at different angles. I think the original Hummer, wouldn't it do like 40 degrees driving sideways? I watched a bunch of Hummer stuff over the last couple of weeks to educate myself on the brand, the legend that was. And so that kind of stuck in my mind from one of the many things that I saw. And you can see at all times what the truck is doing. It's got those 18 cameras. You can bring them up on the centre monitor. There's interestingly, no air supply lines to the tyres, because in some trucks and off-roaders, you can deflate and inflate the tyres because you might want to let some air out going off-roading. But it will sound the horn. If you're deflating the tyres, it will honk the horn to let you know you've reached the required PSI. What about autonomous driving? Well, Super Cruise is achieved. That sort of black bar that goes over the top third of the steering wheel. Inside that black section is sensors, a driver-facing camera for some eye tracking and awareness stuff so that it knows you're looking at the road. Super Cruise is basically autopilot, and it will allow you to drive on 200,000 miles of highway and roads in the US and do all that lane changey funky stuff. The version we're talking about today is indeed fully loaded. It's available in 2022. It'll cost you $112,000, but there will be cheaper versions. One of the great things about EVs, they are smooth, they are unruffled, and they are quiet. I like that about electric vehicles. So obviously, what do a bunch of engineers do? Well, in 0 to 60 mode, which is what we'll call it, they have added some seat rumble, so I don't know, to make your bum shake, to feel like you're going fast, and the speakers emit special bass noises to simulate an engine going fast. Why do car makers do all this stupid stuff, this assault on the senses, to make it seem like you're driving a combustion car? I don't know. I think it's crazy. Hope it disappears. I don't like it, but maybe, I don't know, their focus groups say that people want that sensation of driving a combustion car. Each of the motors are 250 kilowatts of power, by the way. That's 1,000 horsepower, although not available all of the time. Only available in 0 to 60 launch mode, not to be unleashed at all driving modes. And whilst we're talking about power and wheels, etc., I did mention earlier in the podcast that GMC have put this headline figure of an £11,500 pound-feet of torque out there, which is insanity, and clearly no vehicle has that. This, on the road. And in many ways, all they've done is change the definition of torque. Normally, every other car gets that stat listed as the torque from the engine, but GMC have quoted it at the point that the tyres meet the tarmac. But of course, the motors, which turn, then a transmission, a gear, and there is a gear ratio on those. So you have to do the multiplication of that 11,500 by the ratios. The front box has a 13.3 to 1 ratio. The rear gearboxes have a 10 to 1 ratio. So you do the maths and it works out. The various things I've read today have stated between 800 and 1,000 pound-feet of torque, which is very, very, very high. And if only they'd given that number, it would have been worth talking about, but they tried to do some sort of, I don't know, willy waving in the gym changing room stat with a stupid number. Yes, there's regen. I mean, yeah, okay, yours is the most torque ever in a car. Congratulations. Yeah, one pedal driving, full regen, all that, never touch the brake pedal. So much power inside the Hummer, by the way, that because you'll be going off-road and you'll often be having the steering lock on full turn and applying the power, they've had to put some sort of software regulators in to protect the half shafts. If you do floor it on full lock, it'll limit the power so that you don't break the car in two. And clever stuff. Right, let's talk specifically about the battery. It is good for 350 miles of range. There's 200 kilowatt hours of stored energy. That is double just about everything on the road at the moment, the biggest EV in production for now. And it's a double-decker battery because there's so much ground clearance, well, height in the vehicle, so much room, that they've done a double-decker stacked battery. They're using GM's new battery technology developed alongside LG Chem. These are pouch cells, not the little cylindrical ones that Tesla use. These pouch cells can either lay flat or they can stand upright, depending on the type of car they're going in, according to GM. And if you're making the Hummer, which has a lot of room, you can actually put them upright and you can stack them 2 by 2 on top of each other. These are the Ultium batteries that, whilst other car makers are making headlines by removing the cobalt, GM are adding some. These are the nickel, manganese, aluminium, cobalt chemistries. You'll hear it called NMCA. Cobalt is good for the cathode. It's good for the longevity of lithium-ion batteries, but it's very bad in terms of how it's extracted from the earth, and it's pretty rare, it's expensive, but they've put some into their batteries. Each module, each battery module, because a battery pack is made up of, this is the way they do it, not the way that it'll be in the future with some EV makers using cell-to-pack technology, but the way they're doing it, they have gone down the route of modules. And a very kind of utilitarian look. So the battery pack is made of 24 modules. There are 24 pouch cells to a module, and they're stacked, and each 12 modules make up a single layer. What would normally be a skateboard design, but then they stack a double-decker battery. So the bottom layer is 400 volts, and the top layer is 400 volts. So together, it's an 800-volt system. A total of, I think, 576 cells. From the pictures that we saw at launch, there's very little wiring inside the battery pack, for good reason. It all talks to each other wirelessly. 24 modules talk to the BMS over the air. That is not connecting them up with a spider's web of cables, and because it's all wireless, GM say it means that one of the benefits are future-proofing. If it needs a repair, you can take out one of the 24 modules, pop a new one in, and bingo bango, you're back on the road. And actually, if in the future technology improves, you could put all of that new technology into your battery. Remember when Tesla first made EVs, they talked a lot about repairability, and their battery was swappable, like the Neo ones are. They drop out the bottom of the car, and over time, from the original Model S to how the new Model Y is going to be made, as we heard at Battery Day, they have gone in the opposite direction. They're integrating the battery fully into the structure of the vehicle. It is still repairable, but it's tough. The interesting difference in philosophy in the two companies there. Just thought I'd mention it. It's not good or bad, just different ways. Being an 800-volt system means that if you can find one of the ultra-fast 800-volt chargers, you can charge at 350 kilowatt speeds. And one of the considerations of an 800-volt battery pack is, what if you come across and plug into one of the many 400-volt chargers, pretty much all of them out there at the moment, up to 150 kilowatts on the Electrify America network? Well, in those cases, it would only pull, I think, something like 50 kilowatts. Correct me if I'm wrong, battery specialists. Other 800-volt makers like Porsche with the Taycan put in, well, you have to spec a step-down converter. Then you can extract the maximum speed from a 400-volt charger. GM have actually developed this double-decker battery by putting two 400-volt packs on top of each other, double stacking them so you can pull the maximum speed from a 400-volt charger. I think I'm correct in saying that basically means they're able to switch the battery from series to parallel and back again at will. Clever stuff. GM say that it'll add 100 miles in 10 minutes, and of course that's peak charging rate, so when these are finally on the road, we'll check out the charge curve and see what that looks like. So, do GM need to make this truck? Will you buy one? And will it bring more truck fans into the EV world from the sheer amount of power that this thing brings? I would love to know from you what you think, and how does it stack up then to the competition? Well, I guess the big competition is going to be Tesla's Cybertruck and Rivian's R1T. The truck we've talked about today is $112,000. 3 motors, 350 miles of range, 350 kilowatt charge speed. Let's start with Cybertruck. The top spec of that is 70 grand. The cheapest spec of that is 40 grand. Well, we know the Hummer is going to become cheaper over time, and it will be as cheap as 80 grand. But that's still cheapest Hummer 80 grand, cheapest Cybertruck 40 grand. Cybertruck wins there. But of course, the Cybertruck will be in 3 different specs, from 40 to 70 grand, with 1, 2 or 3 motors. The range, well, the cheapest Cybertruck will do 250 miles. The cheapest Hummer will still do 350 miles. So Hummer wins, but for twice the price. Whereas the most expensive Cybertruck at 70k will do 500 miles. In fact, I think the presentation, about a year ago, wasn't it, said 500 plus on screen. Whereas the Hummer will do 350 plus. So points to the Cybertruck. Charge speed at the moment, the maximum charge speed you can get on a Tesla and on a Cybertruck will be, they're advertising 250. Again, we suspect that the new, and we'll see on the Tesla shareholders investor day call, which is in a few hours my time, whether they talk much about 4680 cells and whether that will enable faster charge speeds. Maybe they won't address it, but I'm pretty sure it does. Towing, GMC haven't said. Weight, they've not said. Cybertruck will tow up to 14,000 pounds, and you would think the Hummer has a pretty good towing capacity. Right, let's compare it to the Rivian. Well, the price for the Rivian truck, there is one price that we have, the base price, which is $70,000. So let's compare base prices. Base Hummer, 80 grand. Base Rivian, 70 grand. So Rivian wins. Motors on the Rivian, 4. On the Hummer, base model, 2. The battery size on the base Rivian will be 105 kilowatt hours. So clearly that's going to suffer on range. The top spec Rivian will get a 180 kilowatt hour pack doing 400 miles, which is further by 50 miles than the Hummer. And the charge speed, Rivian have said, will be 160 kilowatts. And again, I would expect that to be improved. That's pretty slow for a big, expensive spec truck, but wildly less than the Hummer. So, what do you think? Will it all come down to the kind of truck that you want to drive? Will it come down to styling? Will it come down to brand affinity? Let me know what you think, and maybe you're waiting for an SUV version of this. I'd love to know. We put the show on YouTube, by the way, so you can leave comments on there. I'd love to read the YouTube comments. Awesome. You know, YouTube is a really toxic place. For some reason, not in my comments, not in the comment section. You know what I think it is? Because everyone who listens to this podcast, I think, is just a pretty cool EV girl or guy. And I actively stay away from favouring one brand over another. I try and be brand agnostic. I try and praise everyone equally, and I try and criticise everyone equally. And for that reason, I love it. Like, my Twitter is a friendly place to be, and my comments are a really friendly place to be. Normally, YouTube is just pretty I hate it. It's pretty toxic when you read the comment section of anywhere these days. But please do have your say in the comment section either, or email me hello@evnewsdaily.com, and I can read those out on a future show. 912 previous episodes of the show. You can get the blog evnewsdaily.com, where all of the archive sits online. We're heading towards 1,000 shows, but to celebrate show 900, we put a little competition online with our friends at the EV Review Ireland YouTube channel. A £100 Amazon voucher would come in very handy before Christmas as a little prize, or the local equivalent currency of where you live around the world. Just make sure that you retweet that tweet. I've pinned it on my Twitter. I'm at EV News Daily. Make sure you're following me on YouTube and following Derek, who runs the EV Review Ireland YouTube channel. Deadline is this Sunday at midnight. Premium partners of the show: Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, Porsche of the Village in Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East, NationalCarCharging.com and AlohaCharge.com. And Richard at rsimons.co.uk. They are the electric vehicle specialist. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. And remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.